The silver tray hit the floor with a sharp clatter, scattering fine china across the polished marble, drawing every eye in Westview Bistro. Emily Harris froze her breath caught in her chest as the room held its collective gasp. The man at table 37 didn't flinch, didn't apologize. He was tall, immaculately dressed in a navy suit that seemed woven from authority itself, his eyes cold, calculating. He scribbled a single line through the tip section of the check. 0. Not $1. The audacity hung in the air like smoke. Emily bent down, steadying her trembling hands on the edge of the counter, fighting the heat rising to her face. Her eyes flicked to the crystal chandelier overhead, catching fragments of light that scattered across the room like broken promises. Her fingers wrapped around the rim of the pitcher she had just refilled, knuckles white, the condensation dripping onto the marble. Lucas's face flushed with a mild fever, and muffled coughs from his bedroom upstairs flashed in her mind. She swallowed hard. She needed that money. Every tip mattered. Behind her, Marcy, a fellow server with a sharpened smirk and a cheap perfume that lingered in the air like judgment leaned against the POS counter. "Serve him first," she whispered, eyes glinting. "He'll chew you up and spit you out." "Just don't screw it up, rookie." Emily didn't answer. She straightened her apron, felt the sting of exhaustion in her calves. Each step up the floor, a reminder that she had been on her feet for nearly 10 hours. The dinner rush had been merciless. She had smiled for strangers who didn't even notice poured wine, for couples who ignored her presence, wiped crumbs off tables that would never leave a tip beyond polite courtesy. The private booth at the back drew her gaze. Velvet curtains blocked the light of the main dining room, isolating a world that seemed separate, untouchable. Benjamin Walker. The name alone made her stomach knot. 42, ruthless, brilliant, and notoriously exacting. The tabloids called him the Ice Architect for his icy deals and cold demeanor in business. Tonight, he was just another guest, but everyone in Seattle knew the story the man could ruin fortunes before dessert. "Don't look," Marcy hissed. "He's not here for a show. You're on your own." Emily nodded, forcing her legs to move. Every heartbeat felt magnified, echoing in her skull like drum beats in an empty hall. Her hand brushed the menu, a paperweight in her trembling grip. She walked forward, her polished shoes whispering against the marble, her mind a whirlwind of calculation of survival. One misstep could end her shift. One wrong glance could make her pay with her job. But she had no choice. Benjamin was already seated, staring at a phone, fingers tapping like pistons. His posture radiated command. When he finally looked up, steel gray eyes assessed her. Not politely. Not with curiosity. With judgment. Emily's stomach tightened. She forced a professional smile. "Good evening, sir. My name is Emily Harris. I'll be taking care of your table tonight. Can I start you off with sparkling water?" His lips twitched in a faint, cruel smirk. "Room temperature, lemon, no seeds, and slice thin. Not bitter. Make it perfect or I walk." His voice was flat, cold, deliberate. Emily nodded. "Yes, sir." Every syllable felt heavy. She turned, rushed to the bar, slicing the lemon with careful precision, discarding the rind as if she were performing surgery. The kitchen buzzed behind her, shouts clattering pans. But her focus was singular. Survive the table, protect her family, maintain control. When she returned, he picked up the glass, swirled it, inspected it, and nodded. "Acceptable," he said, setting it down. Emily exhaled silently, barely registering the relief. The order came chicken breast sauce, adjusted pearl onions, replaced with shallot sauce, reduced for an extra 5 minutes. The chef, notoriously volatile, glared at her over the pass. "Who does he think he is?" "Changing my recipe." Emily's voice was low, barely audible. Mr. Walker is demanding it, chef. I need your help to satisfy the guest. The chef cursed in French, slamming a pan. The tension was electric. Every movement mattered. Every glance could betray weakness. Emily hovered near the pass, her hands steady despite the tremor she could feel in her fingers. She checked the timing, double-checked the plates, and delivered them with measured precision. Benjamin's fork met the chicken. Bite, chew, swallow. He looked up. Adequate. The word struck like a whip. Emily's back straightened. Adequate was not excellence. It was a test. Every second counted. Her pulse surged. He leaned forward, voice cutting. Your life outside this room, Harris. Tell me. Why are you here? Why endure this work? The question was a trap. Emily's mind raced. She could lie. She could evade. She could crumble. But the truth spilled soft and steady. I have a son, sir. Lucas, he's sick. I need every penny to keep him alive. Benjamin's eyes narrowed. A charity case, he said, blunt, devoid of warmth. Emily's hands clenched. No, sir. I rely on my own hands. I work 2 jobs. I sleep 4 hours a night. I do whatever it takes. Her voice trembled, but she held it. Silence followed. Then he was gone. The table cleared. The check lay in front of her. Total $185. Tip 0. A line drawn across where generosity should have been. Emily's chest tightened, fury and humiliation twisting together. Marcy's voice cut behind her. Typical ice architect. Emily's gaze fell to the plate. She wanted to scream. She wanted to storm out. But she crouched, calm, controlled, hiding every shred of emotion. That's when she saw it. Folded neatly beneath the charger plate, a thick card embossed with an unfamiliar emblem. She checked the room. No one watching. She slid it into her apron pocket. The words inside glimmered under the low light. Emily, prove you are more than your circumstances. 12:45 tomorrow. Pier 45. Come alone. Her fingers tightened around the paper, every muscle in her body tense alert. The adrenaline was immediate, fierce, consuming. Lucas, her son. She would go. She would walk into whatever waited. The camera would have followed her through the darkened streets of Seattle, past fog, rolling off the sound streetlights, refracting in puddles, the city quiet, but brimming with potential threat. Every step was deliberate. She checked the time, 12:41 in the morning. The air smelled of salt diesel and wet asphalt. Her breath fogged. She pictured Lucas, asleep at home, fragile, trusting her with his life. She swallowed hard, shoved the card further into her pocket, and continued walking a shadow, moving through a city that had no idea it was about to witness the extraordinary. Behind her, the city remained unaware. Inside Westview Bistro, a waiter wiped a counter, oblivious. A janitor swept past, humming softly. The world had paused for her for this moment, for the impossible task that awaited. Emily's heart pounded, but her face was calm. Every detail mattered. Every sound, every step, every breath counted. She was invisible and untouchable at the same time, and she had no intention of failing. Emily's shoes clicked against the wet pavement as she approached Pier 45. Fog rolled in thick curling around the dim streetlights like smoke from a dying fire. Her heart beat hard, each step measured, cautious, aware of every shadow. The warehouse loomed ahead, a corrugated metal monolith, silent and waiting. One single light flickered above the side door, casting long, jagged shadows across the cracked concrete. She checked the time, 12:45. She was exactly on schedule. A black SUV sat idling nearby, its dark windows reflecting nothing but the gray night. Emily swallowed the lump in her throat. Her fingers brushed the card in her pocket. 12:45. Come alone. The words burned in her mind. She approached slowly. A man with a thick neck and a headset emerged from the shadows, stepping aside with a curt nod. Emily Harris. His voice was low precise. She nodded. Inside. Keep moving until you see the light. The door groaned as she pushed it open, steel scraping against steel. Inside, the warehouse was cavernous. Rows of shipping containers, stacked 3 high, created narrow corridors. The air smelled of salt oil and dust. Emily's coat felt thin, inadequate. Every step echoed a drum beat, marking her progress. She saw the glow of a single overhead lamp far ahead. She kept her eyes on it, moving like a ghost, aware that one misstep could draw attention she didn't want. Benjamin Walker sat at a folding table under the light. His suit jacket was gone, sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms, unexpectedly muscular hands stained with ink. Papers were stacked neatly before him, some spread in a grid-like pattern, others annotated with lines and arrows. He didn't look up as she approached. 2 minutes early, he said, without turning. Emily's pulse spiked. "If you're on time, you're late." She replied the words her father used when training her to move faster, to think ahead. He finally looked up over his glasses. A flicker of amusement crossed his face, brief, fleeting, gone, as soon as it appeared. "Sit," he said. She lowered herself onto the metal chair, its cold biting against her thighs. The papers in front of her were a maze of numbers, codes, container IDs, weights, destinations. To anyone else, they would have looked like gibberish. Emily's eyes scanned quickly, patterns beginning to emerge. "Notice anything unusual?" he asked, voice calm but sharp. "The variance in weight," she said softly. "High-value shipments consistently arrive lighter than recorded departure weights. The discrepancy is systematic." He finally looked at her eyes, narrowing. "Go on." Emily flipped through more sheets, tracking dates, signatures, and shipping routes. The pattern repeated. October 4th. Container 405 electronics weight, short by 6%. Signed, M. October 8th. Container 405, weight, accurate, signed, J.R. October 12th container, 612, luxury textiles, short by 7%, signed, M. She whispered, "It's too consistent to be error. Someone is skimming the cargo before it reaches the official logs." Benjamin leaned back, arms crossed, studying her. "And you're certain?" She nodded, tracing the dates with her finger. The crane logs match the heavy weight, but supervisor records show the lighter number. It's deliberate. M is falsifying documentation to cover theft before the cargo leaves port. His eyes sharpened. He traced the line of signatures with a pen. Marcus Thorne. Emily froze. She had just named his brother-in-law. Her voice caught. I could be wrong. I'm just a waitress, not an auditor." "But the numbers match. The pattern is consistent. I see exactly where the losses occur." Benjamin's gaze was piercing, deadly. He leaned forward, tapping the pen against the table. "You saw it in 20 minutes. Emily swallowed, heart racing. He reached into a briefcase and pulled out a checkbook. "If you're correct," he said, voice flat, "this will cover Lucas's surgery." And then some. He handed it to her. Emily's hands shook as she took it, the paper crisp, heavy, with possibility. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing down. This was no longer a game. This was life and death for her son, and a reckoning for someone else. Benjamin's phone buzzed. He ignored it. "You have a choice," he said, eyes on her. "You can walk away now, or you can continue and see this through." Emily's mind raced. Every instinct screamed caution, yet the thought of Lucas's fragile chest, the wheezing cough, the desperation of nights spent counting pills and insurance claims propelled her forward. "I'll continue," she said, voice firm despite the trembling inside. He nodded. "Good. You're not just watching numbers. You're watching people. Observe the patterns, anticipate the errors, document everything. One mistake could cost millions or someone's career. Emily leaned in, studying the layout. Her hands moved over the papers, fingers brushing annotations, circling discrepancies. Each calculation, each cross-check, was a step deeper into a world she had never touched before. Hours passed. The warehouse was silent, except for the hum of the lights and the scratching of pens. Emily's eyes burned, but she did not look away. She traced Marcus's signatures, cross-referenced container weights, noted patterns of high-value items, repeatedly shorted. It's always high value, always under his watch, she muttered almost to herself. Benjamin's eyes never left her. At one point, a shadow moved near the far doorway. Emily's pulse jumped, but Benjamin only observed, unflinching. She realized he trusted her completely, even in the presence of potential threats. That trust was heavier than any check, sharper than any blade. She worked with the precision she had honed, serving tables for years, translating instinct into analysis, translating observation into certainty. Finally, she laid out the pattern, clearly all high-value containers, signed by Marcus, discrepancies, consistent records, manipulated to appear as normal loss. She looked at Benjamin, exhausted but steady. He tapped the papers with a finger, eyes narrowing. "You've done well." His tone was approval, but it carried weight judgment and an unspoken understanding that Emily had passed a test she hadn't even known she was taking. He tore a sheet from the checkbook, signed it, and handed it across. "Lucas's surgery is covered. Today." Emily's chest tightened. Tears threatened, but she blinked them back. "Thank you," she whispered. Not just for the money, but for the validation, the recognition of her intellect and courage. Benjamin leaned back, watching her. "You're more than you appear, more than your circumstances. You see patterns others miss. You have instinct, and you have integrity. Those are rarer than wealth." Emily nodded, absorbing the weight of the words. The warehouse felt smaller. Suddenly, every shadow less threatening. He rose, straightening his shirt. "Tomorrow you continue observing. You document report. You remain vigilant. And you remain unseen until I say otherwise." Emily nodded again, heart still pounding. This was only the beginning. She had crossed the threshold from invisibility into influence, from survival into power. The warehouse was no longer just a building. It was a proving ground, and she had just claimed her place. Outside, fog had thickened. The lights of Seattle shimmered like distant stars through the mist. Emily pulled her coat tighter, slipping the check into her pocket. Lucas's face appeared in her mind, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the night's trials. She allowed herself a breath, slow, measured, as though breathing could steady the storm within. She had stepped into a world far larger than herself, a world of wealth, deception, and trust, and she had not faltered. The SUV engine roared in the distance. Benjamin's presence remained unseen, yet his expectations loomed over her. Emily took a step forward, then another, every movement precise, every decision deliberate. She was no longer just a waitress. She was an observer, a sentinel, a force in a world that underestimated her completely. And the night, thick with fog and possibility, stretched out ahead, full of unknown tests and hidden truths waiting to be uncovered. The warehouse doors closed behind her, steel grinding, sealing the moment. Emily's hands were steady, her mind sharp. Tonight had been a crucible. Tomorrow would be another, and she would not fail. The warehouse had emptied, leaving Emily alone with the echo of her own footsteps and the faint hum of the overhead lights. She had memorized the rows of containers, the patterns in the logs, the subtle marks that told her who had handled what and when. The crisp night air outside was sharp against her face, fog curling around her coat like a shroud. She could feel the weight of what she had uncovered pressing against her chest, yet the adrenaline kept her steady, focused. Lucas's image flashed in her mind, and she clenched her fists, letting determination replace fatigue. A sudden click from the metal door behind her made her spin. Marcus Thorne stood in the shadows, tall, imposing, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice low. Dangerous. His eyes glinted under the harsh warehouse light. Emily's heart raced, but she didn't move backward. She had no intention of retreating. "I'm exactly where I need to be," she replied, her voice calm but hard-edged. Marcus stepped closer, boots scraping the concrete. "Do you even know what you've touched? The wrong paper, the wrong line, and you could ruin everything. You're just a waitress." He laughed, a short, bitter sound, but Emily's eyes did not leave his. She didn't flinch. "I'm not here for a job title. I'm here for the truth. The rest of it is yours to explain." He frowned as if the audacity startled him. Bold words for someone who couldn't even calculate a shipment properly yesterday. Emily tilted her head, letting a faint smirk ghost across her lips. "And yet, here I am still standing, still seeing what you don't want anyone to see." She turned and gestured toward the open spreadsheets on the table. Marcus's gaze followed, sharp and suspicious. The papers were meticulously organized discrepancies, highlighted patterns annotated. Emily had traced every missing container, every falsified weight, every altered signature. Her finger hovered over the sequence, linking Marcus to the high-value shipments. "This is consistent," she said quietly. "Not error, deliberate. You've been siphoning shipments under the guise of shrinkage. Every week, the same containers, the same results." Marcus's jaw tightened, a flash of anger crossing his features. He stepped closer, voice low and menacing. "Do you understand the power you're playing with? You could destroy careers, businesses, even people. And for what, a child's medicine?" Emily's chest rose and fell. Not for medicine, for honesty, for doing what's right, for people who can't protect themselves. He laughed, then sharp and hollow, a sound that ricocheted against the metal walls. "Do you even know who you're dealing with? Benjamin Walker doesn't tolerate mistakes. If he finds out you've exposed this..." His voice trailed off, leaving a threat, hanging like fog in the air. Emily's eyes narrowed. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with. And so do you." Her words seemed to catch him off guard, if only for a moment. She pivoted, moving around the table, her gaze sweeping the spreadsheets once more. Every container with discrepancy, every signature falsified. M for Marcus, always M. The crane logs prove the weight was right. You've been counting on the secondary records to cover it up. But the pattern doesn't lie. Marcus froze, calculating. His hands flexed at his sides, and Emily could feel the tension radiating from him. She stepped closer to the edge of the table, pointing at the highlighted entries. "You're relying on the system to hide your theft. But I've traced it, recorded it, and verified it. You're cornered, and I'm not leaving until Benjamin knows." A long silence stretched between them. Emily's pulse was steady, her breath controlled, yet every fiber of her body screamed alert. Marcus's lips pressed into a thin-line, eyes darting toward the door. "You realize you've just made yourself very visible," he said, finally, his voice tight. If Walker finds out, Emily didn't respond. Her hands were firm on the table, eyes locked on him. "I am visible, and I am ready." She could see the calculation behind his stare, the shift from anger to caution. He knew she had leverage. He knew the risk. He didn't move, just watched, breathing shallowly. Then footsteps echoed in the warehouse. Benjamin Walker entered calm, imposing his presence, immediate, a force that bent the air. He surveyed the room, eyes landing first on Emily, then Marcus. "I see you've met," he said, voice steady, but carrying an unyielding weight. Marcus stiffened, caught between fear and pride. Emily stood straighter, chest forward, hands clasped ready. Benjamin's gaze swept over the spreadsheets, the notes, the highlighted discrepancies. He lifted an eyebrow. "Interesting," he said. His tone was flat, but sharp, slicing through the tension. Marcus's shoulders tightened. "You're implying," his voice faltered, uncertain. Benjamin turned to Emily, eyes cold yet calculating. "You've done your homework." Emily nodded her chest, rising, exhaling slowly. "I traced every pattern, verified every anomaly. I know who's been manipulating shipments and how." Benjamin's lips curved faintly. "Impressive," he said, voice low. "Not many would have the courage, the precision, or the insight to do this without prior experience in logistics." Emily felt the weight of his acknowledgement, a recognition deeper than applause. Marcus stepped back, tension breaking into something else, desperation. "You can't. She's a waitress." His voice trembled, though he tried to mask it. Emily's gaze swept to him, unyielding. "I don't need a title to see the truth." "You relied on assumptions, not observation. That's your mistake." Benjamin leaned forward, resting his hands on the table. "You've proven two things tonight. One, your skill. Two, your integrity. Both are rarer than wealth and far more valuable." He turned to Marcus' voice, sharp, lethal. "And you, I think, need to reconsider your approach to oversight." Marcus's mouth opened-closed. Nothing came out. He had been unmasked, not by Benjamin alone, but by the courage and clarity of a single mother who refused to be invisible. Emily's hands trembled slightly, but she controlled it, steadying herself against the metal edge of the table. Benjamin pulled a folder from his briefcase, slid it across. "For Lucas," he said, voice firm. Emily's eyes widened. The documents inside detailed funding for the surgery coverage, for medication, and additional support to ensure stability. Her throat tightened, emotion bubbling, yet she held it in check. Benjamin looked at her directly. "Your life, your child's future secured, because you were willing to see what others missed, willing to act." That's power, Emily. Not the wealth in this building, not the titles. Power is insight, courage, and integrity. Emily's chest rose and fell, tears threatening, but she swallowed. "I thank you," she whispered. He nodded, once, eyes sharp. "This is only the beginning. You'll continue observing, reporting. You'll be my eyes where others fail to see. Your role will remain discreet, but critical. Do you accept?" Emily nodded, steady, firm. "I accept." The warehouse seemed smaller now, yet heavier, filled with the potential of everything she had uncovered, and everything yet to come. Benjamin's presence was commanding, but not oppressive, a test of strength and trust. She felt it settle into her bones, the weight of responsibility, the certainty of purpose. Marcus moved toward the exit, silent, defeated. Emily watched him leave, feeling the lingering heat of confrontation in her body, yet a strange calm settled over her. She had stepped out of the role assigned by a circumstance, and into one defined by her own abilities. The fog outside had thickened, streetlights fractured in the haze. Emily stepped into the night coat, wrapped tight, check-secure, heart racing but mind clear. Each step echoed against the quiet pavement, a rhythm of resolve. She had entered a world far beyond the tables she had served, yet had claimed her place in it. Tonight had been the test. Tomorrow would be the real work. And she was ready. The first rays of dawn cut through the warehouse windows, slicing the shadows into long, jagged lines across the concrete floor. Emily Harris adjusted the strap of her bag, each breath steady, measured. Her hands were sore from the previous night's work, but her mind was sharper than it had ever been She could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down, but it steadied her instead of breaking her. Benjamin Walker's instructions were clear. Observe, document, report. No mistakes, no assumptions, only facts. The office section of the warehouse was buzzing quietly. Clerks shuffled papers, forklifts rumbled in the distance, and the low hum of fluorescent lights filled the space. Emily slipped past unnoticed, the rhythm of her movements, silent and deliberate, honed from years of service behind the trays of Westview Bistro. Every eye passed her without recognition, and she let them. Invisibility was her shield, observation her weapon. She approached the table where the shipment logs had been laid out the previous night. The stack of papers seemed endless, a sea of numbers and codes. She traced the paths, recalculated the weights, confirmed discrepancies. Marcus Thorne's manipulations were subtle, almost artistic in their deception, yet consistent. Emily's eyes darted between sheets, noting the dates, the recorded weights, the authorization signatures. Each anomaly formed a pattern that told a story, one of greed, betrayal, and arrogance. A sudden noise made her freeze. A door creaked somewhere behind her. A metal chair scraped across the floor. Emily's heart jumped, but she did not flinch. She tucked the pencil into her hair, crouched slightly, and scanned the room. A junior clerk passed oblivious headphones in, humming, softly. Relief washed over her, but she did not relax. The warehouse was a cage of potential threats. Every shadow could hide another mistake waiting to be exploited. Benjamin appeared, then stepping out from between the rows of containers. He moved with purpose, eyes sharp, taking in the logs spread across the table. His presence was immediate, commanding attention without effort. He didn't speak at first, just observed Emily's meticulous work, the way her fingers traced sequences, the way her brow furrowed slightly in concentration. "You've already started without my prompting," he said, finally, voice low, precise. Emily looked up, met his gaze, and nodded once. I needed to confirm the patterns before distractions could occur. Benjamin's lips twitched in a shadow of a smile, then flattened into a line. Good. The warehouse is full of distractions. Every second counts. Every assumption is a risk. Emily returned to her calculations, scanning rows of container IDs, weights, and departure times. Her eyes narrowed. She had noticed a subtle shift in the pattern of approvals. Some shipments with high-value electronics had signatures slightly askew, and timestamps that did not correspond to recorded crane logs. Her finger hovered over the anomaly. Notice something. Benjamin's voice was calm, but every word carried authority. Emily pointed to the irregularities. "These containers," she said quietly, "the approval timestamps don't match the crane logs. Whoever signed off intended for the discrepancy to go unnoticed. It's deliberate." Benjamin leaned forward, studying the highlighted entries. His eyes narrowed. "And you're confident in this?" Emily straightened, meeting his gaze. "Yes. The pattern is consistent. Every shipment manipulated in the same way. The only constant is the same signature." He exhaled slowly. "Marcus Thorne," he said, letting the name hang in the air. Emily's stomach tightened, but she held her composure. Benjamin continued, "This is delicate. One misstep, and you've compromised evidence, not just accountability." Emily's fingers tightened on the papers, nodding once. She knew the weight of the truth she carried. The quiet tension in the warehouse was suddenly broken by the sharp sound of a phone vibrating. Benjamin ignored it, eyes fixed on Emily. "Do you understand what's at stake?" he asked. "This is not just about numbers. It's about trust oversight and the integrity of the company. One leak, one misjudgment, and everything could collapse." Emily nodded, her throat tight. "I understand." She returned to the logs, each movement deliberate, meticulous her mind, scanning, calculating, mapping connections. She traced the line of discrepancies, aligning them with personnel schedules cross-referencing shipping manifests. The evidence was solid, the pattern undeniable. A door banged open suddenly, and Marcus appeared at the threshold, eyes blazing with anger and calculation. "You're overstepping," he said, voice sharp, measured to intimidate. Emily looked up calm. "I am following the instructions of Benjamin Walker," she replied evenly. Marcus's gaze flicked toward Benjamin, who was silent observing. Emily's posture remained steady, every inch of her body conveying resolve. Marcus stepped closer, tone lowering. "Do you realize what you're doing?" "Exposing me. If Walker finds out," Emily's eyes did not waver. "Then the truth comes out," she said. Her voice was quiet, but carried authority. Marcus's hands flexed at his sides. His lips pressed into a thin line. He studied her calculating weighing. For the first time, he seemed uncertain. Benjamin's voice cut the tension. Emily continued, "Document everything. Accuracy over haste. Detail over assumptions." He leaned back, eyes scanning the logs. "Do not allow intimidation to interfere with observation." Emily nodded, fingers steady, scanning, marking, cross-checking. Each sequence, each signature, each log was a step toward clarity. Hours passed. Emily's hands ached, her eyes burned, but she remained relentless. She had identified a pattern of manipulated shipments, traced the author, and cross-checked against the secondary logs to confirm authenticity. Marcus's interference, once confident, had diminished. He hovered near the exit, silent watching, but unable to act. Benjamin finally broke the silence. "You've done more than most seasoned auditors could accomplish in a week," he said. Emily exhaled, though she didn't smile. It was meticulous work, but observable, she said. Benjamin's eyes softened slightly, a rare acknowledgement. "Precision, patience, and courage. You've shown all three." He reached into his briefcase, pulling a checkbook. He slid it across the table. "For Lucas, surgery medications care." Emily's fingers shook as she took it, heart-pounding. She blinked back, tears swallowing hard. This was beyond any expectation, beyond any fear. She felt the weight of responsibility, the validation of her intellect and courage. Benjamin's gaze swept over her. "This is only the beginning. You'll continue to observe, report, and verify. Discretion is key. Trust is earned and must be maintained. One false move could undo all this work." Emily nodded steady, her mind already racing through contingencies, planning her next steps. Marcus's eyes narrowed. He knew he had been unmasked, yet he could do nothing. Emily's quiet authority, her meticulous documentation, had stripped him of power. Benjamin's confidence in her made that clear. Emily exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain, though adrenaline still thrummed through her veins. She had survived the crucible of observation, exposure, and confrontation. Outside, the city was waking. Fog had lifted slightly, the first light of morning reflecting off wet pavement. Emily stepped out coat-tight, around her check secured in her pocket. The warehouse behind her hummed with quiet activity, oblivious to the significance of the night. She had claimed her place not with force, but with intellect, courage, and an unwavering sense of purpose. She paused at the edge of the dock, taking in the cityscape, the water glinting under the rising sun. Lucas, Benjamin's trust, the weight of truth in her hands. She adjusted her bag, squared her shoulders, and stepped forward. The work ahead would be relentless, demanding, and dangerous, but Emily Harris was ready. She had crossed a threshold. The invisible had become seen, the powerless had claimed authority, and the night's trials were only the prologue to what was yet to come. The following morning, Emily Harris returned to Westview Bistro. The sun cutting through the city like a promise she wasn't yet ready to believe. Her coat was damp from the light drizzle, her bag slung across her shoulder check, for Lucas's surgery folded neatly in the inner pocket. Inside the restaurant smelled of fresh bread, roasting coffee, and polished wood. Waiters and waitresses moved with the precision of ritual, but Emily felt detached, a shadow passing through the familiar chaos. Marcy leaned against the POS terminal, eyes sharp as ever. "You look different," she said, smirk, in place but uncertainty hiding behind it. Emily didn't reply. She walked past, heading to the corner where she usually picked up trays, her movements deliberate. Today was no longer just about surviving the rush. It was about leverage observation and the silent accumulation of information. The morning shift buzzed as usual, yet Emily's focus was elsewhere. She had been instructed by Benjamin to track not only the logistics records, but also interactions among the staff, subtle alliances, and unspoken tensions. She noted the way the sous chef, Jonathan Fields, rolled his eyes at the hostess, how the junior servers whispered when the maitre d' passed by, the furtive glances cast toward tables with high tipping regulars. Patterns emerged in whispers, glances, and the rhythm of footsteps across the tile. Her section had a new table reserved for a corporate luncheon. Emily approached a notepad in hand, scanning the guests. She recognized one of them immediately. Stephen Caldwell, a financial consultant who had dealt with Benjamin in the past. He was well-dressed, arrogant in the way of men who believed influence came from numbers alone, and he carried a faint scent of imported cologne, sharp and invasive. Emily's gaze lingered on the way he assessed the staff, the subtle downward tilt of his eyes when he thought no one noticed. "Good morning," Emily said, her voice neutral yet firm. "I'll be taking care of your table today. May I start you with water or coffee?" He looked at her expression flat, as if her presence was irrelevant. "Water. And make sure it's cold. Ice, not room temperature." "Don't screw this up," he said, smirk, fading into a precise threat. Emily nodded, not betraying her awareness of the challenge. Every movement, every gesture would be scrutinized. She could feel the tension in the air, thick as fog. Between tables, she noticed something odd, a server slipping an envelope under the table leg of one of the VIP booths. She waited until the person had left, then slid forward, picking up the envelope discreetly. Inside were transaction slips and notes indicating a small, repeated diversion of tips. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to indicate collusion among certain staff. Emily's pulse quickened. This was exactly the kind of observation Benjamin had asked her to make quiet, unnoticed, yet critical. The morning wore on. Emily's mind mapped every movement, every subtle inflection in conversation, every minor gesture. She cataloged the interactions between Jonathan Fields and the hostess, noting the way she deferred subtly to his suggestions, the way he attempted to assert authority with a half-smile that betrayed impatience. She wrote it all down, careful, meticulous. By noon, a delivery arrived, a large stack of invoices and shipment manifests for Westview Bistro's catering branch. Emily carried the stack to the side office, pausing just long enough to glance at the first page. A pattern emerged again. Some large catering orders had been approved and partially billed without full accounting entries. It wasn't illegal, not yet, but it was sloppy, and it was deliberate. She could see the fingerprints of the same network she had noticed with Marcus Thorne the previous night. The lunch rush hit like a tidal wave. Emily moved from table to table, each guest a potential observation point, each order a thread in the tapestry she was weaving. At table 12, a wealthy retired judge was particularly demanding. He criticized the temperature of his soup, the arrangement of silverware, the angle of his chair. Emily adjusted everything, noting the precision of his complaints and cataloging the subtle power dynamics at play. The man believed himself untouchable. Emily did not flinch. She had been trained, hardened by necessity, and now by observation. Between tables, she overheard snippets of conversation. Two junior servers were gossiping about tips, trying to calculate who was favored, who had influence over the managers. Emily let the words sink in, analyzing tone emphasis and unspoken meanings. It was a microcosm of power, a miniature world where alliances and deceptions determined survival. She cataloged it, all eyes, flicking constantly, fingers poised to note every detail. At 3 p.m, the maitre d' called her to the private side office. Benjamin Walker was there, sitting at the large oak table, fingers steepled. His presence filled the room. "I've reviewed your observations from last night," he said, voice low, controlled. "You've identified patterns. I hadn't noticed inconsistencies that could have cost me thousands. This is impressive, but the real test begins now." He slid a folder across the table. Emily opened it carefully. Inside were photographs, receipts, and notes regarding several high-profile clients who had frequent interactions with the bistro's catering branch. Benjamin's finger tapped a specific section: client accounts, with recurring errors in billing and delivery. "I want you to track these over the next week. Patterns, discrepancies, anything out of the ordinary. And Emily, pay attention to people, not just numbers. Who is influencing whom? Who is lying? Who is covering for someone else?" Emily nodded, heart hammering. This was the challenge she had been waiting for: observation, with stakes intelligence applied to human behavior as much as to data. Benjamin's eyes held hers, piercing, assessing, weighing her capacity. She did not blink. She would not falter. The afternoon passed in a blur. Emily moved from table to table, noting interactions, subtle exchanges, and gestures that revealed hidden intentions. A chef passed by, muttering complaints under his breath about the front-of-house staff. Emily noted the timing, the audience, the inflection. A server whispered to another, glancing repeatedly at the manager. Emily cataloged that too. Every detail mattered. Every slight shift in tone could reveal a network of deception or collusion. By late afternoon, Emily's hands ached. Her eyes burned, but she was relentless. Each observation built a mental map, each note connected to another. She had reconstructed the flow of information, influence, and deception within the restaurant, with a precision that surprised even herself. The patterns emerging were subtle, almost imperceptible, but consistent. She could see the outlines of a network, and she knew she had to tread carefully. As the evening crowd began to arrive, Emily took a moment to breathe, leaning against the edge of the bar. Her mind raced with calculations and observations, yet she allowed herself a single controlled exhale. Outside, Seattle's skyline shimmered under the early evening fog, the city alive, but oblivious to the quiet battle unfolding in the warehouse-turned-restaurant. Benjamin appeared behind her, silent as a shadow. "You're progressing faster than I anticipated," he said. Emily's eyes met his. "I pay attention," she replied. His expression was unreadable. Attention is only the beginning. Interpretation is what separates observation from insight. Keep your focus. Watch everything. Trust nothing at face value. Emily nodded. She was ready. The lunch rush had been a trial, the afternoon a test. The real work, the weaving together of human behavior, anomalies, and deception was just beginning. Tonight would bring new players, new pressures, and another layer of scrutiny. But Emily Harris had proven she could navigate the storm, and now she would chart its course. The restaurant lights dimmed slightly as dusk settled over Seattle. Emily moved between tables, recording, observing, calculating. Each step was measured, each glance deliberate. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a sentinel, an analyst, a silent force, uncovering truths that others thought invisible. The night promised challenges, and Emily met them with unflinching focus. And somewhere in the shadows of Westview Bistro, a note she had yet to reveal burned in her pocket, a reminder that the stakes extended far beyond the restaurant into the world of wealth, power, and the fragile life of a boy who depended entirely on her vigilance. The evening was just beginning, and Emily Harris was ready to confront everything waiting in the dark. The restaurant was quiet when Emily arrived for the evening shift, the polished floors reflecting the muted glow of chandeliers and the early hints of city lights through the tall windows. The air smelled of roasting, garlic-warm bread and freshly polished silverware. Emily's coat was damp from the drizzle outside, clinging to her shoulders, but she barely noticed. Her mind was focused, tracking every detail from earlier observations, mentally cataloging interactions and inconsistencies. Tonight, she was not just a server. She was a collector of truths, hidden beneath polite smiles and clinking glasses. Marcy hovered near the POS eyes, sharp and calculating as always. "You look exhausted," she said, but there was an edge of curiosity in her tone. "I don't feel exhausted," Emily replied evenly, her voice steady, betraying nothing. She adjusted her apron, slipping the folder from her bag, the notes from Benjamin tucked inside. The man's instructions were clear: observe, record, analyze, and detect any deviation from patterns that could indicate manipulation or deception. Her first table of the evening was a corporate dinner, a group of men and women in tailored suits and sparkling jewelry, their laughter soft, but calculated a display of privilege wrapped in civility. Emily approached with a notepad, offering menus, with precise movements, attentive but discreet. One man older, with a silver watch and a faint scar above his brow, glanced at her with mild disdain, eyes scanning her as if she were part of the furniture. Emily's gaze met his, steady, and she nodded once before continuing. She noted the slight twitch of his lips, the way his hand lingered over the wine glass, small indicators of ego control and possible overreach. Between tables, she spotted another anomaly, a junior server placing multiple small envelopes under various chairs, moving quickly, looking over his shoulder. Emily waited until he left, then bent and retrieved one. Inside were receipts, partial order slips, and subtle notes suggesting favoritism in distributing tips. She frowned, recognizing a microcosm of a network. She had seen the previous night the early signs of collusion that could destabilize operations if unchecked. As the dinner progressed, the rhythm of the room demanded Emily's attention. Guests shifted seats, servers moved trays with precision wine glasses, clinked silverware scraped against plates. Emily cataloged every interaction, noting who deferred to whom, the small gestures of power and submission that formed a lattice of influence. A chef passed by, muttering in low tones about front-of-house errors. Emily's eyes flicked up. She observed without interrupting, taking mental notes. Each micro-expression, each whispered exchange was a piece of the larger puzzle Benjamin had tasked her with uncovering. The shift intensified when a prominent client, a retired federal judge named Harold Mason, began issuing minute pointed criticisms. The angle of his chair, the temperature of the soup, the arrangement of silverware, the spacing of napkins, each complaint was precise, intended to assert dominance, to subtly test Emily's composure. She adjusted everything, noting every detail, committing it to memory. His observations revealed more than his preferences. They revealed his patterns, his insecurities, and how he exerted influence over those around him. By mid-evening, Emily had mapped a web of interactions, a junior server subtly signaling to a busboy, the sous chef exchanging a brief, meaningful glance with the hostess, a regular client manipulating seating to his advantage. She recognized these patterns as the early indicators of systemic manipulation, similar to what she had uncovered the night before in Benjamin's warehouse. Every gesture, every tilt of a head, every hesitation or flourish held information. She cataloged it meticulously, her mind piecing together the invisible framework of influence and control that governed the restaurant's social ecosystem. A delivery arrived, an urgent set of invoices and catering receipts for a high-profile client event scheduled for the weekend. Emily carried the stack to the side office, noting discrepancies between billing and actual items delivered. Some orders had been partially recorded, others not at all. No outright fraud, but enough to suggest that someone was testing the boundaries of protocol, measuring how much could be manipulated before detection. She documented everything, her pen moving swiftly across the pages, annotations precise, almost surgical. The late shift brought the most valuable observations. The VIP section was full a table of local investors and city officials, all projecting calm authority, but radiating subtle tension. Emily approached with the same deliberate precision, noting every micro-expression, the flick of a wrist, the tightening of a jaw, the brief eye contact shared between individuals that carried more information than spoken words. She recorded everything silently, knowing Benjamin relied on her eyes as much as her calculations. Then Benjamin arrived, quiet, unobtrusive, yet immediately commanding the space. Emily felt the shift in the room, the air itself tightening around his presence. He scanned the reports and logs, his eyes sharp, assessing her work without interruption. "You've compiled a clear picture," he said finally. "Patterns are consistent anomalies noted, but the true test is observing reactions to pressure. Watch for stress deceit and improvisation. Human behavior is the final layer." Emily's hands were steady as she returned to her observations. A junior manager was reviewing invoices, frowning at inconsistencies, muttering complaints about missing signatures. Emily noted the way he tried to cover his agitation, the way he sought validation from the head chef, the subtle signals of unease. Each reaction, each attempt to mask error, added a layer to her understanding of the operational hierarchy. Hours passed with relentless focus. Emily's body ached, eyes strained, yet her mind remained sharp. She traced the path of every transaction, the flow of authority, and the deviations from protocol. Her notes revealed a pattern, a network of subtle manipulation, preferential treatment, and opportunistic behavior that could be exploited or corrected. She recorded it all, creating a comprehensive map that connected people, actions, and consequences. A sudden movement caught her eye. Marcus Thorne from the previous night had arrived at the back entrance, ostensibly for a delivery, but Emily's instincts told her otherwise. He paused, scanning the room, calculating. Emily did not flinch. She observed silently, noting the tension in his shoulders, the careful placement of his hands, the deliberate avoidance of eye contact with Benjamin, who remained discreet in his observation. Marcus lingered, then departed unaware that Emily had documented every step. Her notes would expose the exact path of his interference, the moments where discretion faltered, and the subtle signals of manipulation. Every detail was now recorded, every irregularity mapped, every motion accounted for. By closing time, Emily had not only managed her tables flawlessly, but had constructed an operational blueprint of human behavior, oversight failures, and patterns of influence within the restaurant. She packed her notes, carefully secured the check for Lucas, and stepped into the night air. Seattle was quiet streets, glimmering with reflections of neon signs and streetlights in puddles from the light rain. She inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of accomplishment exhaustion and the anticipation of what Benjamin's next instructions would bring. Her phone buzzed. A message from Benjamin Well, done. Review everything tonight. Tomorrow, the real decisions begin. Emily's fingers tightened around the device. She felt the surge of adrenaline, the thrill of understanding, and the stark realization that the stakes were higher than any shift she had ever worked. She walked toward the ferry terminal, the city lights casting long reflections on the wet pavement. Every step was deliberate, every thought focused. Tonight, she had seen the threads of influence, deception, and ambition. Tomorrow, she would confront them. Emily Harris had transformed the invisible into insight observation, into power, and fear into strategy. The night was far from over, and the true game had only just begun. The morning air in Seattle was crisp and heavy with mist as Emily Harris approached Westview Bistro. Her coat was damp from the drizzle, her boots echoing softly against the cobblestone sidewalk. She adjusted the strap of her bag fingers, brushing the folder that contained her meticulous notes from the previous nights. Each observation, each anomaly, each whispered exchange was catalogued with precision. Today, she would test the limits of what she had learned, pushing deeper into the undercurrents of deception and control. Inside the restaurant hummed with the familiar rhythm of preparation. Servers aligned silverware, checked linens, and coordinated with the kitchen staff. The smell of fresh bread and roasting garlic, mixed with the faint tang of espresso, filling the air with an almost cinematic texture. Emily moved past the entrance, scanning faces, noting body language, small gestures of authority and submission. Every interaction was a thread she could pull, revealing patterns invisible to the casual observer. Marcy, ever watchful, approached with her usual smirk. Late again, with the prep, she said, though there was a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. "Not late," Emily replied, voice steady, just observing. Marcy raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. She knew better than to test Emily tonight. The first lunch table was an early corporate meeting, a trio of finance consultants from downtown, polished and assured. Emily approached notepad in hand, bowing slightly, hand steady. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said. "I'll be taking care of your table today. Can I start you with sparkling water or coffee?" One of the men, tall, with a gray streak in his hair and a faint scar along his jaw, scanned her from head to toe, evaluating, judging. Emily held his gaze calmly, letting the silence stretch for a heartbeat, before continuing. She moved from table to table, weaving herself through the rhythm of the lunch hour, noting each exchange, a whispered conversation, the subtle shift of a chair, the tilt of a head. Patterns of influence, micro-decisions, and quiet assertions of power emerged like constellations against the night sky. Her mind catalogued them, annotating behavior with a precision that left her breathless, yet focused. Between tables, she noticed a junior server slipping small envelopes under the legs of chairs in a VIP booth. Emily waited crouched, letting him leave the area. She picked up one of the envelope's receipts, partial order slips notes, indicating tip manipulation. Her pulse quickened. This was a thread connecting to the observations from Pier 45, a network of subtle manipulation interwoven with deception and quiet self-interest. By early afternoon, Emily's section was dense with high-profile clients. Each table presented a microcosm of strategy and performance. One elderly judge criticized the placement of silverware, the angle of a chair, the temperature of the soup. Emily adjusted everything with care, observing the unspoken power dynamics. The man believed himself untouchable, yet she noted the micro-tremor in his hand as he gestured to a server, the slight hesitation before he allowed the wine glass to be filled. A delivery arrived, invoices and catering, manifests for weekend events. Emily carried the stack to the side office, carefully scanning for irregularities. She found minor inconsistencies, partial recordings, missing signatures, subtle discrepancies in billing. No outright theft, yet deliberate enough to suggest testing the boundaries of oversight. Her annotations were meticulous, precise, and revealing. The evening crowd arrived, and with it, the real test. Emily approached the VIP section, where local investors and city officials gathered, projecting calm authority, each movement calculated to assert dominance. She observed micro-expressions, noting who deferred to whom, small gestures of intimidation and submission, all silently recorded in her mental map. Benjamin Walker entered quietly authoritative, without ostentation. The warehouse-like side office now felt smaller, charged with expectation. Emily's pulse remained steady. Benjamin surveyed the spreadsheets and notes spread before her, his eyes sharp, evaluating her without a word. "You've built a clear picture," he said, voice flat but commanding. "Patterns are consistent, anomalies noted. The real test is observing reactions under pressure. Humans reveal themselves in microsecond decisions." Emily resumed her meticulous work. A junior manager reviewed invoices, muttering complaints, scanning logs, attempting to mask agitation. Emily noted the timing, the audience, and the subtle signals. Each act, each hesitation, each glance contributed to the emergent map of influence and deception. Hours passed with relentless observation. Emily's body ached, her eyes burned, yet her mind remained razor-sharp. She traced every manipulation, every deviation, each one connecting to the network of influence she had begun mapping days earlier. Patterns emerged, signaling collusion, opportunism, and subtle threats to operational integrity. Her notes became a blueprint, a record of accountability. Suddenly, movement at the back entrance drew her attention. Marcus Thorne appeared ostensibly delivering paperwork, but clearly observing the room. Emily's instincts flared, but she did not react. She recorded everything, the timing of his steps, his attempts to remain unnoticed, the micro-expressions betraying awareness and caution. Benjamin's presence was constant, silent, yet his eyes conveyed both trust and evaluation. Emily felt the responsibility heavy in her chest, but she had trained herself to convert tension into clarity. Every observation mattered. Every note could shift outcomes. Marcus lingered, then departed unaware that Emily had logged each detail. By late evening, Emily had constructed an operational blueprint encompassing interactions, anomalies, and influence patterns. She had mapped the network, recorded behavior under scrutiny, and verified every discrepancy. The evidence was precise, undeniable, and actionable. Benjamin addressed her quietly, leaning on the table. "You've surpassed expectations. Few would have the precision, patience, and insight to compile this in such a limited time frame." Emily exhaled, tension easing slightly. "It's all observable," she said, voice steady. "Nothing hidden escapes attention." Benjamin pulled a sheet from his checkbook, slid it toward her. "For Lucas," he said. Emily's hands shook as she accepted it. Inside were confirmations for surgery medications and supplemental support. Her throat tightened, but she blinked, regaining composure. He met her gaze. "This is only the beginning. Continue observing, reporting, verifying. Discretion is essential. One misstep, and consequences ripple far beyond this room." Emily nodded, aware of the gravity. She had crossed the threshold from invisibility into influence, understanding that insight, courage, and integrity were her tools. Marcus had left defeated, powerless under Emily's quiet scrutiny. Benjamin's acknowledgement reinforced what she already felt. She had turned observation into authority. She exhaled slowly, letting the realization settle. The evening had been a crucible. The patterns, anomalies, and human behavior she had recorded would shape decisions far beyond the restaurant's walls. Outside, Seattle's lights shimmered through mist, reflecting in the puddles from the drizzle. Emily walked toward the ferry terminal, coat wrapped, tight notes secured, heart steady. Every step was deliberate, every thought precise. She had navigated the storm of power, deception, and observation, claiming her place as an unseen but essential force. The night was over, but the stakes had only intensified. Emily Harris had emerged from the shadows, eyes open, prepared for whatever challenge awaited next. The night air hung thick and damp over Seattle. As Emily Harris returned to the bistro for the evening shift, the faint hum of traffic below, blending with the soft clatter of the restaurant's interior. She moved with purpose, her bag slung across her shoulder folder, secured inside each step, precise, measured like the rhythm of a metronome. The day had been exhaustive, the morning observations revealing subtle alliances and tensions, but tonight promised deeper layers tests beyond the numbers. Inside the restaurant smelled of roasted garlic, fresh bread, and espresso. Waiters adjusted table settings with silent efficiency. Servers moved trays, as if part of a choreography rehearsed 100 times, and the occasional clink of silverware punctuated the low murmur of conversation. Emily slipped through it, all invisible, and yet fully present eyes, scanning, taking note, calculating. Marcy caught her eye, a fleeting smirk, hinting at curiosity. "You're still at it," she said. "Tired." Yet Emily shook her head. "Focused," she replied, voice steady, betraying nothing. Marcy's smirk faltered subtle acknowledgement of Emily's composure. Emily adjusted her apron and moved toward her first table. Table 23 was occupied by a group of investors, 3 men and a woman, all in tailored suits, each exuding quiet authority. Emily approached notepad in hand. "Good evening. I'll be taking care of your table tonight. Can I start you with water or coffee?" Her tone was professional, calm, deliberate. The tallest man, silver-haired with sharp eyes and a faint scar along his cheek, regarded her silently for a moment, then nodded. Emily noted his posture, the subtle way he shifted weight, the quick glances exchanged with the woman across the table. Micro-expressions, tiny gestures, whispers of intent, all catalogued. Between tables, Emily's eyes caught a movement near the kitchen pass. A junior server's sleeves rolled up, moved quickly, sliding an envelope beneath a chair in a VIP section. Emily waited, crouched, observing. Once the server departed, she retrieved it, scanning the contents. Receipts, partial order slips, minor annotations, suggesting subtle manipulation in tip allocation and order prioritization. Nothing major, but enough to indicate covert coordination among staff. She tucked it into her folder, adding notes, connecting the behavior to patterns she had observed over previous shifts. The lunch rush intensified. Emily's tables demanded attention, yet her mind remained engaged in mapping interactions. At table 12, a retired judge issued detailed critiques: the angle of the chair, the placement of utensils, the temperature of the soup. Each comment was a probe, a test of composure and precision. Emily adjusted everything without hesitation, noting every micro-reaction, a twitch of the lip, the subtle pressure applied to a hand, the fleeting shift of the gaze. She catalogued it all, the restaurant unfolding as a live behavioral study. The delivery arrived, invoices and catering manifests, for a major upcoming event. Emily carried the documents to the side office, scanning for discrepancies. She noticed partial recordings, missing approvals, subtle inconsistencies in timing. They weren't outright errors, but deliberate enough to suggest testing boundaries, a rehearsal of mismanagement. Her annotations were precise, every detail cross-checked, every irregularity logged. The evening crowd arrived, bringing high-profile clients, investors, and local officials. Emily observed with meticulous focus. At one table, a woman subtly redirected the conversation, signaling her influence over a male counterpart, who nodded, but never fully asserted his own authority. Another man, mid-50s, tried to mask agitation as he coordinated a subtle diversion with a server, his eyes flicking to the manager occasionally. Emily recorded every nuance, the invisible map of power within the restaurant becoming clearer with each passing hour. Benjamin Walker entered without announcement, presence commanding immediate. The room seemed to shift, imperceptibly shadows stretching toward him. Emily felt the subtle change. The tension sharpened. He approached her silently, glancing at the spreadsheets and annotated notes she had prepared. "You've captured patterns most wouldn't even notice," he said, voice measured precise. Emily exhaled slightly, but remained composed. "It's all observable," she replied. Benjamin's eyes scanned her annotations, then the dining room, then back to her. The real test isn't in noticing errors, he said. It's in predicting reactions, understanding intent. Who is covering? Who is deflecting? Who is manipulating under the guise of service? Can you do more than notice? Can you interpret? Emily nodded her heart, steady mind alert. I can. Hours passed as she applied herself, moving between tables, observing interactions, tracing gestures, cataloging nuances. A chef muttered under his breath about service inconsistencies. A junior manager fidgeted, glancing at a VIP booth. Emily recorded each detail, cross-referencing with prior observations. Patterns emerged, a web of subtle influence, preference, and covert coordination. She mapped it, silently aware that each note could have consequences far beyond the restaurant walls. Then Marcus Thorne appeared near the side entrance, ostensibly delivering documents. Emily froze, observing silently. His movements were deliberate, calculated to avoid detection. He glanced at her briefly, tension coiled in his shoulders, then proceeded down the corridor. Emily did not move, noting every gesture, every hesitation, every step. She recorded it all, her mind piecing together an invisible network of control and deception ready for Benjamin's analysis. By closing time, Emily had compiled an exhaustive record of patterns, discrepancies, and behavior. Every shipment, every tip distribution, every subtle interaction had been logged. The evidence was precise, undeniable, and actionable. Benjamin approached, hands clasped behind his back. "You've exceeded expectations," he said. "Few would sustain focus and insight at this level for so many hours. But the night isn't over. There are still layers to uncover human behaviors that only emerge under fatigue and pressure." Emily's hands were sore, her eyes burning, but she felt the weight of accomplishment. She packed her notes, secured the check for Lucas, and stepped outside. The fog of the city mingled with streetlights, creating reflections that danced on the wet pavement. She drew a deep breath, centering herself. Tonight had tested her endurance, observation, and judgment. Tomorrow would test interpretation, influence, and decision-making. A message buzzed on her phone. "Prepare for tomorrow. There will be unexpected variables. Trust your judgment. Benjamin." Emily's fingers tightened around the device. The adrenaline surged again, mingling with a profound focus. She adjusted her bag, squared her shoulders, and walked toward the ferry terminal, each step deliberate, her mind organizing, connecting, predicting. She had transformed from a waitress into a sentinel, an observer of human behavior, a silent force in a world that underestimated her completely. The night was over, but the stakes had intensified. She was ready. Each step forward was a claim, every observation a tool, every choice a measure of integrity and courage. Emily Harris had moved beyond survival. She had entered the realm where insight was power and trust, though fragile, was the most valuable currency. The city shimmered around her, reflections in puddles like fractured glass. Emily exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of responsibility and possibility. Lucas, Benjamin, the restaurant, the patterns, the people, every element intersected, and she would navigate them all. Tonight had been preparation. Tomorrow, the real engagement would begin. The quiet determination in her chest burned steadily. She would not fail. The following morning, the sky was overcast. The city of Seattle wrapped in a blanket of gray that muted the edges of skyscrapers and softened the river's reflections. Emily Harris stood on the curb outside Westview Bistro, coat wrapped tightly around her folder clutched in her hands. She inhaled the damp air, each breath steady, controlled. Today, Benjamin Walker had warned the stakes would escalate. Observations alone would no longer suffice. She would be tested on interpretation, foresight, and the ability to act under pressure. Inside the restaurant was alive with the familiar buzz of pre-lunch preparation. Servers aligned silverware, polished wine glasses, adjusted linens. The scent of roasting garlic and fresh bread filled the air, mingling with the sharp tang of espresso. Emily moved through the space, like a shadow, scanning every movement, every interaction, every gesture. The junior staff whispered and scurried oblivious to her scrutiny, unaware that their smallest actions were catalogued, analyzed, and interpreted. Marcy leaned against the POS terminal, eyes flicking toward Emily. "You're intense," she said, tone-teasing but cautious. Emily's gaze met hers, steady, unyielding. Focused, she replied simply and moved past, noting the subtle twitch of Marcy's lips, the faint furrow of her brow, micro-expressions of curiosity, suspicion, and perhaps envy. Her first table of the day was a meeting of local business executives. Emily approached with a calm smile, notepad in hand offering water and menus. The lead guest, a tall man with graying temples and a meticulous posture, scanned her evaluating. He whispered a comment to his companion, and Emily's eyes flicked to the exchange, capturing the nuances of tone and body language. Every glance, every pause, every subtle shift carried information. She recorded it silently, noting patterns in deference, dominance, and influence. Between tables, Emily spotted movement near the back. A server slipped a small envelope under the table of a VIP booth, moving quickly, glancing over his shoulder. Emily waited until he left, then retrieved it. Inside were partial receipts, order slips, and subtle notes about tip distribution. Again, she saw the faint threads of coordination, minor manipulations of perception and reward. She annotated, linking these actions to the behavioral patterns she had documented the previous night at Pier 45. The lunch hour intensified. Each table brought a microcosm of power dynamics. A retired judge critiqued the positioning of utensils, the angle of chairs, the temperature of his soup. Emily adjusted each element precisely, observing the micro-reactions, a tightness in a jaw, a flicker of impatience, a brief glance exchanged among diners. Each reaction was logged, forming a map of influence, subtle hierarchy, and hidden agendas. Mid-afternoon brought the arrival of catering manifests for an upcoming high-profile event. Emily carried the stack to the side office, scanning for irregularities. She found partial recordings, inconsistent timestamps, and minor omissions. The deviations were not catastrophic, but indicated deliberate testing of boundaries, subtle probes to measure compliance and oversight. Emily documented each one, connecting patterns to prior observations, constructing a detailed operational map. Benjamin Walker arrived without announcement, his presence immediately commanding. Emily felt the atmosphere shift. The air thickened, shadows seemed to stretch. He approached her silently, surveying the spreadsheets and annotations spread before her. "You've built a clear framework," he said, voice measured, cutting through the ambient hum. Emily acknowledged him with a slight nod, eyes unwavering. "The real test," he continued, "is now. Patterns are only the beginning. Behavior under pressure, improvisation, micro-decisions. These reveal character, motive, and potential." Emily returned to her observations, scanning tables, interactions, and subtle signals of influence. A server fidgeted, glancing at a VIP booth, muttering complaints under his breath. Emily noted the timing, audience, and inflection. Each gesture, each hesitation, each glance contributed to a complex web she was mapping silently. Hours passed. Emily moved from table to table, observing, annotating, connecting human behavior with operational outcomes. The restaurant became a living laboratory. Micro-decisions, whispered strategies, subtle gestures, all were data points, feeding into her growing understanding of the network of influence, ambition, and deceit. Suddenly, Marcus Thorne appeared near the side entrance. Emily froze, noting his posture, calculating his intentions, recording every subtle action. He glanced at her briefly, tension coiled in his shoulders, then proceeded with deliberate movements, avoiding attention. Emily did not follow. She recorded, silently aware that each movement mattered, each hesitation, each glance, revealing more about character and intent. By evening, Emily had compiled a comprehensive map of operational and behavioral patterns. Every deviation, every micro-expression, every irregularity was logged. She cross-referenced the information with her prior observations, uncovering a subtle network of influence deception and opportunism among the staff and VIP guests. Each detail could be critical, each interaction a clue. Benjamin spoke from the side office. "You've surpassed expectations. Few could sustain this level of observation analysis and interpretation for this duration. But the real challenge begins now, interpreting patterns and predicting behavior before errors manifest." Emily's fingers tightened around her pen, her mind racing, yet her movements remained calm, deliberate. A sudden commotion drew her eyes. A delivery person tripped, scattering envelopes across the floor near a VIP section. Emily moved swiftly, picking up the documents while cataloging the reactions of the staff and guests. Each micro-reaction, a twitch, a glance, a hesitation, was added to her mental map. She noted the subtle ways influence was exerted, concealed, and redirected within the room. As the night wore on, Emily's observations became increasingly precise. She had traced discrepancies in logs, subtle manipulations of tip distribution interactions, revealing covert alliances among staff. Every gesture, every exchange, every deviation was logged, building a multi-layered understanding of behavior and influence. Benjamin approached again, standing silently behind her. "You've demonstrated more than observation. You've shown insight, judgment, and composure. These are rarer than wealth, and more valuable than any credential. Your discretion and precision are remarkable." Emily nodded, absorbing the weight of his acknowledgement, the unspoken approval that signified trust and responsibility. He extended a folder across the table. Emily opened it carefully. Inside were confirmations for Lucas's surgery medications and supplemental support. Her chest tightened as she absorbed the scope of the responsibility and the trust placed in her. She blinked, swallowing the surge of emotion. This was beyond validation. This was empowerment, recognition, and accountability combined. Benjamin's voice cut through her thoughts. "Tomorrow, you continue your observations. Focus on patterns, reactions, and subtle deviations. Record, analyze, and anticipate. Discretion remains paramount. Missteps have consequences far beyond what you've encountered so far." Emily nodded, aware of the magnitude of the task, the fine line between observation and action, and the weight of insight she carried. Marcus had long departed, his attempts at interference, rendered ineffective by Emily's careful documentation and analysis. Benjamin's confidence in her reinforced what she already felt. Her presence and skill had shifted the balance. She exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain, while adrenaline still hummed in her veins. She had navigated the storm of deception, influence, and scrutiny with precision. The city outside shimmered through the mist reflections fractured across wet pavement. Emily walked toward the ferry terminal, each step deliberate, every thought methodical. She had transformed from a waitress into a sentinel, observer, and strategist. The night's trials had ended, but the stakes had intensified. She was ready. Observation was power, insight was authority, and Emily Harris had claimed both. The real engagement was only beginning. The night had settled over Seattle, the city's lights shimmering faintly through the fog, reflecting on wet streets like fractured glass. Emily Harris stood at the entrance of Westview Bistro Coat, wrapped tightly folder in hand, notes meticulously compiled from the past week stacked within. Tonight, Benjamin Walker had made it clear, was the culmination of everything she had been observing, behavior, influence, and integrity would all be tested not in numbers or logs, but in the raw dynamics of human interaction. Inside the restaurant was transformed. Chandeliers glimmered against polished wood, soft classical music wafted through the air, and the scent of roasting meats mingled with the faint tang of citrus from carefully prepared cocktails. Guests moved with calculated ease, some whispering to one another, others observing the room with measured authority. Emily's eyes scanned every subtle movement, a glance held, too long a lip twitch, the slight shift of a hand brushing against a glass. She catalogued each motion with precision, mentally linking it to previous patterns, assembling a comprehensive map of influence that no one else could see. Marcy passed by, eyes narrowing curiosity and unease flickering in her expression. "You've been at it all week," she said, voice low, almost admiring despite herself. Emily simply nodded, not breaking her rhythm. She knew that even the smallest slip in observation could alter the entire pattern she was constructing. The first table of the evening was a group of investors, prominent and confident. Emily approached with the poise she had honed over years of service hands, steady voice calm. "Good evening. I'll be taking care of your table tonight. May I start you with sparkling water or a cocktail?" The lead investor, a man in his late 50s, with a silver streak in his hair and sharp eyes, scanned her assessing judging. Emily met his gaze evenly, noting the subtle flex of his jaw, the slight arch of an eyebrow, the micro-expressions that hinted at his priorities and insecurities. She recorded each movement, silently, every twitch, every glance feeding into the pattern she had been tracking all week. Between tables, Emily noticed a junior server moving quickly near the VIP booth, slipping an envelope under a chair. She waited until he was gone, then bent to retrieve it. Inside were receipts, order slips, and notes indicating subtle manipulations in tip distribution and service priority. It was minor, almost invisible to anyone else. Yet in Emily's comprehensive analysis, it was a critical thread, connecting small acts of collusion to the broader web of influence she had been observing since Pier 45. The dinner rush intensified. Each table became a microcosm of tension and hierarchy. A retired judge critiqued the alignment of silverware, the temperature of the soup, the spacing of napkins. Emily adjusted each item, precisely recording his reactions. The micro flicker of his eye, the subtle tension in his shoulders, the slight hesitation before he allowed his hand to rest on the wine glass. Each of these moments revealed the invisible structure of control and influence, and Emily catalogued them with the meticulous precision of someone who had learned to see what others overlooked. As the evening wore on, Benjamin Walker appeared in the back office, silent but commanding. Emily felt the subtle shift in the room, the air tightening around him. He approached her, surveying the spreadsheet's notes and observations she had compiled. "You've mapped patterns that most seasoned professionals would miss entirely," he said, voice low, precise. Emily met his gaze steady, unflinching. "The next stage is interpretation," Benjamin continued. "You've identified behavior and influence. Now you must predict actions, understand intent, and assess risk. Observation alone is not enough. Insight is required." Emily nodded her mind, already scanning the web of interactions, anticipating possible outcomes, weighting variables. Hours passed. Emily moved fluidly, alternating between tables, observing, annotating, interpreting. She noticed subtle alliances forming quiet manipulations among staff, and the interplay of deference and authority. Each exchange, each glance, each whispered conversation added another layer to her mental map. Patterns became predictions. Predictions became potential outcomes, and every decision Emily made, from how she delivered a plate to how she noted an interaction, carried weight. A shadow appeared near the side entrance. Marcus Thorne stepped in, ostensibly delivering documents. Emily's pulse quickened, but she did not flinch. She noted his posture, the careful avoidance of eye contact, the subtle tension in his shoulders. Every movement was recorded, every deviation noted. Marcus lingered for a moment, calculating, then departed without incident. Emily returned to her work, her focus unwavering. By late evening, Emily had constructed a detailed framework patterns of manipulation, behavioral anomalies, and interlinked actions of staff and clients. Her observations were precise, her analysis meticulous, and the evidence undeniable. She had not only tracked human behavior, but interpreted intent and anticipated deviations before they occurred. Benjamin approached again, silent, assessing her work. "You've demonstrated insight, judgment, and composure," he said. "These qualities are rarer than wealth, and far more valuable than credentials. Your discretion, your patience, and your precision have elevated you beyond the role you were assigned." Emily exhaled slowly, absorbing the acknowledgement, aware that the weight of responsibility and trust placed upon her was immense. He slid a folder across the table. Emily opened it carefully. Inside were confirmations for Lucas's surgery medications and supplemental support for his recovery. Her chest tightened, but she kept her composure. Tears threatened, but she blinked them back. This was beyond gratitude. It was validation of her ability, her judgment, and her courage. Benjamin's gaze was steady. "Tomorrow you continue. Observe, interpret, anticipate. Your role remains discreet, but critical. The web you've traced this week is only the beginning. Errors now could cascade beyond the restaurant. Precision, insight, and integrity are your tools." Emily nodded, feeling a surge of clarity and purpose. The evening crowd had thinned, leaving soft, ambient noise, the clatter of clearing plates and the hum of ventilation. Emily packed her notes, secured the check for Lucas, and stepped outside. Fog swirled around the streetlights, reflections fractured on the wet pavement. She walked with deliberate steps, each movement a blend of purpose and precision. She had transformed from a waitress into an observer, a strategist, a silent force navigating a network of influence and power. The folder containing her documentation, the check for Lucas, and the memory of Benjamin's gaze reminded her of the magnitude of what she had achieved. She had seen patterns invisible to others, interpreted subtle behaviors, and anticipated outcomes. She had claimed authority through observation, insight, and unwavering focus. Emily paused briefly on the curb, taking a steadying breath. The city shimmered under the streetlight's fog, curling around buildings, the river reflecting fractured gold and silver light. The night had tested her endurance, perception, and judgment. Tomorrow would test interpretation, influence, and the application of insight. She adjusted her bag, squared her shoulders, and stepped forward. She was ready for whatever challenge awaited. If you were inspired by Emily's journey and her relentless courage, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment now.